I think planning and demographics use a factor of about 10% of the faculty being, we can accommodate about 10% that way. Now, what you described, really, the new Fountain Inn High School, nobody has a room. They have teacher office space, similar to the design at Fisher and at the Rudolph Gordon Middle School addition expansion. So at some point, if you get up to a larger number, I think they probably can accommodate 3 without doing this. They'll probably have to convert a room to be a teacher office room, so to speak, put teachers in there for their planning, also a place where they can meet with students, and float up maybe a larger number of teachers.
Yeah, I floated that out there to a couple of teachers, and they effectively told me not to move their cheese. So, you can, I thought that was a really good idea to try to create more space, but when you have teachers that have been teaching in a certain way, and I'm all about teachers, making teachers happy right now, because we got to keep them. So, I'd have to say, I didn't hear from anyone in the Fountain Inn community who was not thrilled with this opportunity. Even the ones that had a little bit of apprehension are super excited for Fountain Inn and what's coming. So I'm very appreciative that we're finally here looking at an attendance plan, and that there was some thoughtfulness given to that. You mentioned scenarios, and you showed me how you ran multiple scenarios, because there were kind of things thrown out. Well, if you move this geocode and move that geocode, and so you guys looked at that, and based on, as I understand it, based on those factors that we have given you, none of those other scenarios really fell out.
None of them met as many of your factors as the areas that we moved.
Okay, and when you considered that, thinking about that growth again, I know this is where it really gets to be kind of a crystal ball, not that one, a different one. When you were looking at that, did you look at sort of the projected growth? And because if you see those lots to go, you kind of know what range of housing that's going to be. So did you also consider that growth in looking at that? Is there anything there that could play out differently?
We did consider that. We did look at that, but not really. It didn't really, there was no area that changed that component significantly.
Okay, because I was thinking about if you had a feel on the farms piece, could that influence you if you include, but you're saying you considered that growth as
Yes.
well, kind of projected what that would be?
Right. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's all the questions I have for now.
Thank you, Ms. Wales. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the presentation today, and I know you guys have worked really hard on this. I have told this story several times, so I'll tell it here just so it's on record. But after I got elected in 2014, the superintendent met with me, and he said, I will work with you on anything you want me to do, but please don't try to redraw lines unless we have to. And I have lived through the last 3 months of why this is a really personal and sensitive issue that, frankly, needs to be done, and also is going to be painful to some group of people somewhere. And currently, the majority of those people live in the area that I represent. And so I appreciate the time that staff have spent talking through those issues and asking questions. And I have a few more, so if the board will just be patient. I encouraged the neighborhood to copy me on emails that they sent to the district and to send additional questions to me, and the district provided, I think, a really good, thorough answer to the majority of those questions, but some additional ones were sent to me or they didn't see those answers, so I will also apologize if some of these have been answered before. But over the last couple of months, I've heard from about 95 unique individuals who live generally in the Ashmore Bridge area, which is the area that is the majority of the homes that are being moved from Malden to Hillcrest. And the challenge I see with it is when you look at nearly all of the other major redrawing of lines that we've done in the last 15 years, they've been to move people from an existing school to a new school. And so there is a lot of joy and enthusiasm about that. these particular families are being moved from one school to their rival, which isn't a new school, and so they, I think, have, some legitimate concerns. So if we could maybe just kind of start with this idea of choice, and priority choice and family choice, and I want to ask a question that was asked earlier, because I think it was asked differently than I would have asked it. So if you have a sibling currently at Malden and you're in this area, then as a trailing sibling, you won't be affected really indefinitely, because you could continue to have children that are, as long as they're less than 4 years apart,
Yes.
they,
Yes, sir.
children yet to be conceived could be a part of that trail. But if you don't have a sibling currently in the high school, then you are affected by this, because you don't get then that kind of front of the line
component,
choice.
right.
Is that correct?
Yes,
So
sir.
when we talk about families that are affected, there are two types. There are ones who've already had kids and are starting to work their way through the pipeline, and there are ones who have not yet entered high school or have
Correct.
graduated from high school and now are having kids that are not going to move up to the front of that line. Is that correct? That
Right.
there are two different types of
And,
scenarios.
and really, the priority choice component is more for the second part that you mentioned.
So if we could talk a little bit about those two choice options. So one is for families who have siblings and are going to kind of be grandfathered in, and one is priority choice. So describe to me what that second priority choice means. Does it mean that you move to the front of the line? Does it mean that you just have an extra factor? How certain should a family feel that their priority choice is going to move them ahead of other families who opt into the district who don't have priority choice, based on the way choice is designed now?
As choice is designed now, actually, what I envision is that people who live in this area that we're talking about, they would complete a change in assignment choice lottery form during the lottery window. But we would pull those out ahead of any others, and they would get in ahead of anybody else.
So
And
they wouldn't be in the traditional lottery.
No, they would
They'd be
not.
pulled out and dealt with separately, and then lottery would handle any spaces
Afterwards.
after that. Okay. But they would be, so then in those two scenarios, let's say there's one slot at Malden High School, and there's a parent with a sibling already at Malden, and there's a parent who is now entering Malden ninth grade. Are they considered equal, or how
No,
would
the sibling would
the
be,
sibling would be?
just like all of our
Okay.
choice programs, a sibling has a higher weight.
Okay, and so then if that family that has priority choice but not a sibling gets in, then they would also then
Then
have
they
higher
would,
weight for
then
their
the
younger
sibling for them would kick in.
Okay.
if they-
Okay, that's great. So when we look at the capacity of Malden, and I appreciate the clarifying question about what capacity means. It looks like Malden's going to go from about 2211 to about 1852, which is, I think, about 435 slots that are going to come open. And the way the proposal, the motion is written, it's given priority until we go back up to 2211.
Yes, sir.
So when you look at the lots to go at 585 for Malden, and knowing that you know substantially more about kind of growth projections than even you're willing to put on paper, you know, when you look at that, when does that tell you we're probably going to reach that tipping point where we're back to 2211? I mean, those 585 lots to go, we're talking about how many kids would you think are in those 585 lots, maybe?
Those 585 lots would probably generate about 50 to 60 high school students.
50, 60 high school students. Okay, so
Now, we also look at, lower grades and all those things and turnover and regeneration. But I think we would be safe in saying that we won't get back up to that. Once you got to go through the 4-year process, but a good 6 to 7 years.
So this is basically buying us 5 or 6 years. And
Now, you know, that's not an exact science in any
right,
shape or
Right.
form,
I'm-
what these developers do and
Right.
who moves in and how many students they have and all those things, but.
well, and I mean, one of the things that I thought was really eye-opening to me were the maps that you brought in for us that also showed the annexation that's happening in the district,
Yes, sir.
particularly in the city of Malden. And so when we look at growth projections and this desire, particularly from all the candidates running for city council, that all of these neighborhoods stay in the city of Malden, those people who are currently on city council have caused the majority of this problem by annexing farmland and undeveloped land and turning it into neighborhoods that they call part of Malden, correct?
Well, yes, they've extended, the city of Malden particularly has extended down, and they've annexed what was the old Bonnie Bray Golf Course, which is right on Fork Shoals Road, as you know, which is really a very long way from, and along the way between there and back toward the city, they've annexed several other, as well as annexing to the north and to the south on their previous city boundaries.
One of the other questions asked kind of about the city of Malden is this idea that students who live in Malden all go to Malden High School. But I know we looked at the maps and actually found that they're actually going to multiple schools. Can you just speak a little bit to, I believe there's high school students who are assigned to 4 different high schools in Malden, is that
Yes,
that
if you
correct?
look at the city boundaries of Malden, and look at our attendance areas, they are assigned to 4 different high schools. That is Southside, Jailman, Malden, and Hillcrest High. Actually, if you look at, the city of Greenville, they are assigned to 7 different high schools. TR, Travelers Rest, the city limits are assigned to 2 different high schools. And the city of Greer, 3 different of our high schools, and then a high school in Spartanburg School District 5.
So we already have neighborhoods within the city of Malden that are going to Riverside, then going to Southside, going to Jailman, and going to Hillcrest. And so this is an additional whittling away of a city that's larger than the school that's named for it can hold.
Well, I mean, we're a separate entity from municipalities, and our boundaries do not adjoin city boundaries. There was also a little misunderstanding about addresses, and we certainly don't know how the U.S. Postal Service determines zip codes, and they Bethel Elementary, Malden Elementary, and Malden Middle are within the city boundaries of Malden, but their addresses are all Simpsonville addresses. And you have that, like Greer, there are Greer addresses way down at Woodruff Road, but they're not in the city of Greer. So you also have that issue.
One of the reports that you guys sent to us, and I know when we met prior, you had visual aids, so I'm trying to recall them, but it'd just be helpful if you could kind of talk through. I know that the community provided input of other geocodes that should have been moved instead of theirs, and I just want to talk through a few of those scenarios because I've heard them most often. So one is one is the Holly Tree area. So if we could maybe pull up a map just to kind
We actually embedded in your onboard docs into our different scenarios we looked at, and Mr. Costin is going to help me and bring up Holly Tree.
So talk to me a little bit about, so Holly Tree is this area now up here encircled in
Holly
yellow,
Tree
correct?
is the yellow.
Okay.
Holly Tree is very expansive. It's very large. It was built a long time ago, large home lots. It includes the Holly Tree Golf Course. It is 4 geocodes that encompasses all the homes in there. And we did look at that. It's right here. Malden High is right here. Now, like I said, from one side to the other, it's very expansive. It's a very large area. But a staff member, all these houses right here are part of Holly Tree. There's one entrance to this area right here, and there's an entrance right here. A staff member drove from right here to Malden. It took 5 minutes. The other issue with looking at this is there are not enough high school students. There are only 110 high school students in this area. And of course, we were looking to move about 240 from Malden to Hillcrest. So after looking at that and looking at the parameters and looking at the number of students, we did not recommend moving that.
To say those travel times again, so to travel from Holly Tree to
From this section
to
of
Malden
Holly
High
Tree,
School,
5 minutes.
and to travel from there to Hillcrest High School,
Uh,
I think it was like 15 or 17 minutes.
17 minutes, I believe it was.
And when you compare that to the folks who live on Ashmore Bridge Road, what was the travel time that you guys determined to get from Planters Road to Hillcrest?
Well, if they drove from using one of I had staff drove from the pool house in Planters Row to Malden High during school traffic time, and it was 3.7 miles, and it took 18 minutes. And then they drove from Hillcrest High, they drove to Hillcrest High, getting on 276 and taking 385, and that was 7.1 miles, and travel time was 16 minutes. Now, anytime you drive, depending on the traffic of that day, is going to make it. We also drove down Main Street through downtown Simpsonville, and that was 7.5 miles, and time was 21 minutes at that time.
So you guys also drove, I think Kilgore Farms was another one that was proposed, kind of the neighborhoods over near Bell's Crossing.
There was a suggestion of 4 geocodes, AMR2, KGF1, SGW1, and WGJ1. And all of the scenarios are in yellow, if that would help you. This is the area where we were assigning. This is the outline of Fountain Inn, the red. This is one of the geocodes right here. It's the geocode that Monarch Elementary resides in. And then these 3 geocodes. Now, what that would have done would have made all this out here islands to Malden. And Kilgore Farms, which you mentioned, is this geocode right here. Staff drove from there to Malden High and to Hillcrest. The distance to Malden was 6.1 miles and 27 minutes, and to Hillcrest was 9 miles and 21 minutes. Now, all these geocodes together were a little more than what we wanted to put into Hillcrest, and it also created an island of several geocodes out here to the end.
And the possibility of those neighborhoods being moved up to, I think that's Riverside's area, that wasn't an option for alleviating overcrowding? Rather than moving families down to Hillcrest, moving them up to a different high school?
To a different high school. We actually early on looked at some of that and considered some of that. If you go back to our long-range facility plans back in previous years, it would say we might incorporate JL-Man and Riverside into that. But I'm telling you, we've had so much growth in both of those schools' attendance area, we just could not, in good conscience, recommend that because they've both been growing from their attendance area each year and are getting right at their max.
Excuse me just a second, Mr. Lewis, how
Yes,
much
sir.
more time you need?
At least 15 minutes, please.
Or to extend for 20 minutes, I
Thank
have at least one other after you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
The other thing here was this increased feeder patterns. Currently, these geocodes here either feed to Malden Middle or Riverside Middle. And Riverside Middle currently feeds to 4 high schools. And this would cause them to then be feeding to 5 high schools. And 2 of them feed to Malden Middle. Malden Middle currently feeds to 2 high schools, and this would cause them to be feeding to 3 high schools. We did a lot of work in the early to mid-2000s to try to decrease the number of middle schools and elementary schools feeding to, and the number of middle schools that high schools were feeding to. And we've tried to maintain that improvement that we made in those years. This would go opposite of that.
Let's maybe stay with feeder patterns for a little bit since I think I remember hearing at the presentation that you guys did at Hillcrest Middle some information that I didn't know. So I'm gonna ask it again to make sure that I'd understood it correctly. So this proposed change would, I think I heard you say, would move then Hillcrest Middle School's population almost entirely to Hillcrest High School, or entirely to Hillcrest High School?
Now, currently, right now, 73% of Hillcrest Middle attends Hillcrest High.
Okay.
With the proposal, or the recommendation of the area from Malden to Hillcrest High, those students already attend Hillcrest Middle. And that will increase it to about 83% of Hillcrest Middle then being assigned to Hillcrest High.
Where are the other 17% of students who attend Hillcrest Middle, but where are
They're
they
at
assigned for?
Malden.
They're at Malden, okay. When you guys looked at the travel time from particularly from Ashmore Bridge to Hillcrest High, you know, the concern that I heard more than anything else is this idea that because the bridges weren't put really in the most appropriate places for the city's growth, it is really difficult to get from Ashmore Bridge Road to Hillcrest High School without driving on 385. So when you guys planned out and routed out the path that your staff drove, did you drive the 385 route, or did you drive the down Main Street route?
Staff drove 2 routes, and there is another route that they could take. They could go down Standing Springs Road and come across, but we did not run that route. Staff did one down 385 and the other down through the city of Simpsonville.
And which one is this one that's 16 minutes? The time that you guys have kind of estimated as your travel time and
That one was down 385.
down 385. Yeah, I mean, I just, of all of this, it's the thing that gives me the most anxiety, because we have 16-year-olds who are driving substantially faster on the interstate than they're driving down down their neighborhood roads. And I know that when I was 16, that would not have been an option that my parents would have wanted for me based on my driving record from when I was 16 to 18. And so I worry about, you know, the data really suggests that students who drive faster are more likely to be in accidents than adults who drive faster. So I know one of the scenarios was to do some sort of a traffic study to kind of measure the impact and all of that. Is that something that the planning department does, or is that something that others would be responsible for?
No, we do not do that. That would be, I mean, a traffic study of, you know, the interstate and so forth, I think would be up to South Carolina DOT. I will mention, and of course, I always share whenever we're getting ready to make a proposal. I always meet with our transportation department and talk to them. As far as bus transportation, they were pleased from the fact that they said the buses would be going opposite of most of the traffic, which would be, in their opinion, much better option for them getting students to school on time. Now, you know, I don't think Mr. James is here today, but as far as safety studies, that would be someone else.
So there's not a requirement that when we reassign students at a high school that we do some sort of traffic safety study?
No, sir.
And if that was to be done, it'd be done by DOT would be the ones that do that?
It would probably be South Carolina DOT or some other entity.
I'm not aware of there actually being, either in the State Department of Education or Department of Transportation, a precedent for or an office assigned to conduct travel studies. Now, they do, as you all know, whenever we plan either an expansion or a new facility like Fountain Inn High School, SCDOT has to give final approval to the site location, and they have to give final approval to the ingress and egress curb cuts for driveways, stacking lanes, nearby intersections. But we would have, you know, it's just kind of a fact of what we deal with living in a more congested area. We have students that have to travel fairly congested routes to school throughout the district. Now, one thing that we did look at here is what are the alternatives? The alternatives are longer in distance, probably longer in time, because as Ms. Farley's already mentioned, the flow going to school in the morning is opposite the majority of traffic if you use the interstate. That probably wouldn't be true for surface streets, but there are multiple routes by which students could drive to school if their parents don't wish for them to drive on the interstate. And we certainly understand there are a lot of parents that don't want their children, particularly when they first begin to drive, to drive on the interstate. And I assume they're choosing now for their students to drive to Malden High and not use the interstate to get there, which from some of those locations would be the most quick and direct route to Malden High School. But certainly the quickest route to Malden.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that particularly this section of Malden, though, I mean, when I lived there, that was most affected by the construction of the toll road, because it added an additional several lanes of traffic that the bridges don't cross over. And so there really is only one way to get from this neighborhood across the interstate, and that's to go back into town and then go across through Main Street, Simpsonville, and all the other options require a considerable number of weaving in and out of back roads to get past where the toll roads would block you off. So it's just a difficult neighborhood to get to Simpsonville from. And you know, when I look at, I think it's unique to this school, because most of the other schools that we look at that are near the interstate, the majority of the students come from that side of the interstate. You know, when you look at Southside, for example, the majority of kids don't have to travel on the interstate to get to Southside, even though it's on the interstate. So it's the one that heard the most from families, and I think 75% of families 65% who reached out to me, that was their one concern is I will have a 16-year-old who is learning to drive, and either they have to take 30 minutes to get to school, or I have to put them on the interstate, probably with friends who are going to be a distraction to them. So it's
Or to ride the bus.
well. So let's talk a little bit about the buses. So currently, I know one of the issues, particularly with this neighborhood, is that students are late getting to Hillcrest Middle School, and that the travel time for buses has kind of slowed that process down. So I know Adam isn't here, but I mean, is it your opinion that moving them against traffic is going to increase the frequency that students will get to school on time? Or because it seems like we're adding an additional length to those buses, but we're driving on the interstate with professional drivers. So
As I know you recall, the three main factors that cause buses to be late: driver shortage, traffic, mechanical breakdown. Driver shortage is a huge nationwide regional issue, not just for us, but for anybody that employs people with a commercial driver's license. But most recently in our district, traffic has surpassed mechanical as being a reason for being late. So anytime we can move or route opposite the majority traffic, that helps with that issue. Moving less traffic, less likely for accidents or traffic backups for any reason when we're moving opposite traffic. So, in that area, in the mornings, if you're going south, you're opposite traffic. In the afternoons, if you're coming north, you're going opposite the majority of traffic. So it should expedite those bus routes. Again, in a scenario where we don't have enough bus drivers, and that's still the biggest issue with the bus transportation. And I think we have a large number of students in there that ride the bus, if I remember the numbers correctly. Is that right, Ms. Farley?
I'm sorry,
A
Mr.
large number of students in there that ride the bus currently. Is that correct?
I know the afternoon just from Planters Row was 34.
How many?
34 just from Planters
Okay.
Row in the afternoon.
okay. If we could maybe turn for a second to board policy AD, because I know that it was primarily the board policy that was used to provide the criteria that we use for determining schools. And I just have a few questions about it. Am I doing all right on time? How much time we got? 8 minutes. All right. So let's skip down maybe to the bottom paragraph. So this board policy talks a little bit about how we go about the process of redrawing lines or drawing lines, and it talks a little bit about a student assignment advisory council. And I guess the question I have is that the policy is written that a student assignment advisory council would consist of 15 members. Each board member would appoint one member from the district, and the superintendent would appoint 3. So can we talk a little bit about, if we could, kind of why in this particular scenario we chose not to use an advisory council as opposed to kind of with the way it's spelled out here in board policy?
I will talk with that a little bit and ask Dr. Royster to contribute any additional he would like to. But the policy allows for 3 mechanisms for adjusting attendance area. The first of which is where a board member particularly wants something considered, that has to be brought before the whole board, and they have to vote to have us do a study. The second is if an attendance area needs to be adjusted in a specific geographic area within the district for local concerns, such as overcrowding, we shall make the administration. And then the Student Assignment Advisory Committee, which is, as you mentioned, a committee that is, each board member appoints 1 person from their election area, the superintendent appoints 3, and the chair in the Planning and Demographics Department and other departments as needed provide all the data and the sources, and planning and demographics serves as the liaison between SAC and the other departments that we need. Now, we used SAC a lot in the early to mid-2000s when we were in the throes of the BEST program and were literally adding on and building new schools all over the district. And that is the main purpose when you are doing wide swaths of the district to make student assignment changes. But in this specific area, we're in a specific geographic area of the county being impacted, two current high school attendance areas being impacted because of building a brand-new school. This was also true for when we added Gordon to make it a K-8 for that assignment area, for Fisher, and for middle school, and for Monarch. Those were all geographic specific areas, and those were the reasons. And that was the reason this was handled under item 2 of your board policy AD.
So, Mr. Webb, so we're reading that as there are three options for reassigning schools. There's the board option, the administration on its own option, and the administration with this committee option. Is that correct? That's correct. Okay. And so in this case, the administration chose option 2, which was to go about this plan and then to bring it to us without this committee.
Yes, sir, that's the option that we've chosen, I think consistently since 2005, where it affects a smaller regional area. Basically, the ones we've done since 2005 have been because a school opened. Now, the impact might have been to some other schools in the same general area, but it was for a school opening. Well, one of the pluses to that whole committee is actually one of its downsides as well, and that is you have a whole lot of people that would have been engaged in that process from out in the community that really have no stake in the outcome. And in the process that we chose, we utilized planning and demographics to objectively review all the information, provide a recommendation, provide the opportunity for all the public affected to speak to that recommendation, and then we can modify that or not, as the case may be. And in this case, we made several modifications to it based on public input.
Okay. The last question I have is just about farms numbers. So if we could look at the slide that talks about the assignment areas for Hillcrest, Malden, and Fountain Inn. So am I reading correctly that this proposed change would reduce Hillcrest's farms numbers from 32.85% to 27.28%?
Yes, sir.
And Malden's is basically unchanged, 23.7 to 24.1. And then
Yes, sir.
now Fountain Inn High School will have 37.35% of students on free or reduced meals based on all of these changes.
Yes, and based on the recommended assignment plan for Fountain Inn.
Okay, and then the final question I have is just that some of these changes in population for Malden and Hillcrest are they going to have an effect on like their high school athletics designation? Are they still in the same classification if they move down these numbers, or are they?
Right now, year one, it would not, I don't think, affect them.
Okay.
Now remember, we're talking 2 years out till the first reduction. Realignment occurs right now every 2 years. This year is a recommendation year for a new alignment. That alignment would take effect next year, and it would be in effect for 2 years. So in the fall of an odd-numbered year, you do the realignment, that will take effect for the next fall's even-numbered year.
Okay.
So what might happen between now and when Fountain Inn is occupied year 1, year 2, and year 3, it could change multiple times, not only depending on what happens with us, but also that depends on what happens with other people.
Okay.
There is not a firm established cutoff number. In other words,
Okay.
right now we have 5 classifications. 5A is not a set number of like, you get to 1,800 and you're
Okay.
5A. It's based on the largest 32 or 48, I don't remember which number it is, schools in the state. The High School League Constitution is written such that reclassification is done every 2 years, and there can be no fewer than 3 nor more than 6 classifications. So you could go and have only 3, 1A, 2A, and 3A, or you could go all the way up and have 6A. We've never had 6.
Right.
Most we've had is 5. We've had 4 with split divisions within the 4A and within single A. So all of that at this point would really be purely speculative as to what might happen.
So I just have a final follow-up and then I'm done, I promise.
Without objection, we'll try to extend for another 10 minutes.
All right, so I know that a lot of that we don't know,
Yes, sir.
but if we looked at the projected populations of these schools and nothing changed with every other high school in the state of South Carolina, and Malden moved from 2287 to 1852, would we currently project that would cause Malden to drop from, I mean, is it going to move it out of the top? It's still going to be in those top 30 largest schools in the state.
If everything stayed exactly, if everything was static, nothing changed, no.
And Hillcrest as well, going down to 1635, would it?
It would stay the same, I believe.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, staff. Thank you, board members, for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Suddeth.
Can we go back to the summary recommended plan on our presentation?
Could you hear his question?
I got an idea about what, trying to understand about when. We've got a year and a half before the new school opens. And then we've got 4 years before the new school is full, 9 through 12. We've got here in this summary, 744 students are going to go from Hillcrest to Fountain Inn. 193 students are going to go from Malden to Fountain Inn. And then the other thing is we're trying to reduce the enrollment for Malden and for Hillcrest. So we're going to take 242 students from Malden to Hillcrest High. We're still in just a time frame of 6 years. When you go to the slide before that, the recommended assignment plan based on the previous map, we're going to take 502 students from Hillcrest, and that will reduce their population. We're going to take 435 from Malden, and that will reduce their population. So when we take those two to put in Fountain Inn, that gives Fountain Inn 937, 502 plus 435. All right, if we're looking at this, is this 744 students or these 502 students, whichever one, is that going to be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5? Or haven't we got to look at this in a 6-year cycle? So how many people are going to go from Hillcrest to Fountain Inn next year, the year after that?
These numbers are for when the school is completely populated after 4 years, which will be in 2024, 25. So you can pretty much take a fourth of the numbers to get the number for the first year, because they're fairly even numbers.
All right, so the 744 and the 193 is the final 2024-25.
Yes, sir.
All right, what about the numbers on the previous one, on the previous map, the 502 and 435? When's that taking place?
Over,
Again, that is after the school, Fountain Inn High School is completely populated. The 502 is the net, Mr. Sudduth. We're taking 744 out of Hillcrest, but we're adding 242. So the 502 is the net impact. We're taking 744 out of Hillcrest to Fountain Inn, but we're adding 242 to Hillcrest from Malden High, and that net is 502.
Are we doing this through a period of 6 years?
Yes, sir.
nobody moves next year, and then it's over a period of the 4 following years.
One grade.
And that's gonna be an increment from
Yes,
each
sir.
year, because
One-
we're adding a class.
One grade at a
Fountain
time.
Inn each year. All right, what about if we got more students coming into Malden and Hillcrest next school year? What are we gonna do with them?
Well, we know that the capacity for those buildings to hold students exceeds what we're dropping their enrollment. So to some number, we have room for growth there.
When will that enrollment drop?
It will begin to drop
2 years?
year after next.
Okay,
In
what
the
about next year?
21-22 school year.
Are we gonna continue to add the Malden and Hillcrest next school year if the people move in? Or are we gonna
If
simply say, no,
if they
you
move
can't
into
in?
the existing attendance area, yes, sir. They'll go to school there.
All right, so the numbers that we're putting down is just simply something to go by. It's not something we can stand by.
It's a number that we, to the best of our ability, we have to be able to project.
All right, so as we move forward in the coming years, then we should have a better idea about exactly what's gonna happen. So rather than make all of these assertions and provisions, then we need to just kind of see what happens as we go down the road here. Because should something happen, we've got 2,000 lots at Hillcrest and only 585 at Malden. So as long as we have an economy, then these things will continue to get better. But should we have a reversal in that, then probably, not probably, but there could be a reduction in this. So I guess what I wanted to say here, we talk about we're gonna make, we've got 14 high schools, this makes 15 high schools. We've got classification from 4A to 3A to 2A.
Now we have a 5A, 4A, 2A, 3A, 1A.
Who's our 1A?
We don't have any 1A schools.
All right,
That's
so,
the smallest schools in the state.
all right, so what is the, and this is something down the road, Dr. Royce, it's not something I really am wanting to focus on right now. We do have realignments, and I understand how real, but that's talking about athletics only.
Yes, sir. That's the
That
this year is
realignment has
actually
nothing
a
to do with the
realignment.
school. Are we trying to think about anything that we can add to this new high school that would make it more attractive to people? You know, we've always had, all our schools, you know, we've always put programs in there to get people to come into. What programs are we gonna put in this school so it will attract people to go to that school?
Well, the whole structure of the school, having that advanced manufacturing and engineering component to it, and you've seen the drawings that include that. And I believe we have Ms. Tiller scheduled for December
December alternate January.
to do a presentation, a more thorough presentation of what the curriculum will be. You can actually now, Fountain Inn High School is on our website, just like all the other high schools, so people can go in there and see that. The things that have already been done and the discussions that we've already had down there in that community about that program, I believe that's one of the reasons that you really are not hearing anything about the assignment to Fountain Inn other than we heard from a community, we want to go there. So I think they are very well informed on the program to our ability to do so until it's fully fleshed out. But they certainly know the intent. They've seen the design. It's very unique and unusual in its design, and it will be unique in the program that it offers in opportunities in everything from what we think of as traditional college preparatory work to college preparatory work related to automation and engineering to technical preparation related to automation and engineering, where they might leave there and go directly to work or go to Greenville Technical College.
If we've got 2 years down the road, a ninth grade at Fountain Inn, next year 10th, next year 11th, next year 12th. So we really are looking for 937 at that fourth year.
But 4 years from its opening date,
Its
which would
opening
be
date, we're looking-
21-22, yes, sir.
Is there a minimum number we're looking at there? What if we only have 750? Is that going to affect us? And I know that's just a
Might make it a
hyperbole.
little harder to schedule, but it wouldn't affect the program. I don't think that's going to be our problem. I don't think it will. Doesn't appear to be.
That's a guess on my part anyway, Dr. Royster. That's something we try to project, and then we try to say, well, what if this and what if that? But we got 6 years.
Yes, sir, and this
Really
reflects
5.5 years to really, before we have a full new high school with a full student body
sir.
enrollment.
Excuse me, Mr. Suddeth, without objection, we'll extend for 20 more minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Suddeth.
I just got one other. We were looking at the student assignment recommendations. We're using ELA and math. What is the significance of using that in a new school?
One of your factors is consider, of your policy, considers the test data, and Dr. McCrary's office provides us with ELA and math data to use. The math is related to the algebra test being taken. And it
Why
is-
are we making this information available in building a new high school? We've got percent met and above. Now, I can look at the number of forms. That tells me how many are, what their, I guess, level is, the faculty utilization, and the students. But I don't quite understand what the significance of the math and the language scores are. Does that mean that they're going to be better, so I want to go to this school, or I'll be worse, so I want to go to that school? I want to understand why we're talking about using English and math.
That's the only student achievement data that we would have for that age student who ultimately would attend the school, and that meets one of those 11 criteria for one related to academic attainment.
Yes, the board policy AD on student assignment, one of the 11 factors is to avoid a high concentration of low-performing students at a school. And that is why we always show test data, Mr. Studeth, because of your all's policy AD.
What does this say with what we've got right here? Does it say that Hillcrest is better than Malden, or Malden better than Hillcrest, or both of them will be better than Malden, Fountain Inn, when you take and combine them? I've got projections based on it from 87% to 74, projected based on a plan to 77. I'll look at that more closely. I just can't quite understand why we're going to take all of a sudden and say, well, hey, this is the English and math scores at this school, And if we're gonna make these changes in 5 years, this is what the change in the scores will be. And I think I haven't based schools on their English and math scores yet. So maybe I'll do that. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Suddeth. Ms. Goodwin Caldwell.
Thank you for the presentation, Betty. And Mr. Sutter hit on one of the questions that I had with the capacity of Fountain Inn High School being at 937 in 6 years, and the capacity is 1,000. Will we be having to build on in 6 years? If you saying it's going to be 937 and capacity is 1,000.
It's possible that in 6 or 7 years, this body's gonna have to decide either to add on to Woodmont, Hillcrest, Malden, or Fountain Inn, or some or all of them. That's possible. I mean, we're trying to predict a future that's a little bit difficult to predict. However, we went through the greatest recession that this country's experienced since the Great Depression. And this school district continued to grow by 100 students at the depth of that recession. So even given the economic cycles that indicate in the next 5 to 7 years, it's likely we will experience some form of recession. That may temper the current growth we're seeing, which has accelerated in the last 2 years. So is it possible that that school will hit 1,000 in 25, 26? It's possible, probably not likely, but it's possible. And a future board may have to determine now's the time to build that other 1,000 seats. Now, some number can be accommodated at Hillcrest and Malden. Depends on the growth in those areas. You also have Woodmont down there, which is currently under 1,800. Betty, you're right at 1,800.
Yes, sir.
But it has a capacity of 2,000. So there will be room between Woodmont, Hillcrest, Malden, and Fountain Inn, proportional to their overall size, to absorb growth. What we cannot accurately predict, no one can, is when and exactly where that growth might occur in those 4 high school attendance areas.
My question is, why did we choose 1,000 and not building a high school for 1,500, say? Why did we choose 1,000 as the capacity to build this first school?
For 2 reasons. One is our projections indicate that we would have a viable population for that school by this year, and that seems to be borne out in what's happening down there. We want to make sure that we're recommending to you all to build things just ahead of time. We wouldn't have wanted to recommend that you put 1,000 seats or 500 on that school if we didn't think the population would be there, because you would in turn had to have levied additional tax millage to pay for that. The board had to levy millage, additional tax millage to pay for the construction of Fountain Inn High School. So it was done in a balancing act, our recommendation, between what would meet the projected need, provide some space for growth, and at the same time have minimal impact to the taxpayers that ultimately have to foot the bill.
Okay, I have a question about she made a comment about the test data. Do we ever look at the test data of the low performance schools to reassign? Because, I mean, we have some schools that are low performance schools that have an overabundance of farms students. Do we ever look at that to reassign from those schools to other schools? Have we ever done that before?
As a factor in isolation, no. As one of several factors, yes.
Well, and every time I talk to Betty, she's always referencing that policy AD. When was the last time that policy AD was revised? Because I think we, as a board, Linda, I'm asking that we consider looking at that policy AD because one of the islands that is in my area impacts Malden Elementary, middle, and high.